Good morning, class 8. Today we are going to start your civics chapter, and the name of that chapter is A World Without Borders. All right, and another heading that this lesson has is globalization and its significance. So the lesson that we are dealing with is actually the kind of world that we live in today. All right, so just to give you an example, you just have to look around. You just have to look at yourselves. You have to look at your Indian culture, and you have to maybe look, if we compare it with the American culture. Our two cultures are very different from each other. But today, the Indian people, more to say, our identities or our way of life is becoming more Americanized. All right, we copy. It's not only Americanized; it's globalized. Okay, we enjoy having dishes, or it could be coffee, it could be soft drinks, it could be pizza, which are not part of the Indian cuisine. And likewise, the Indian chicken tandoori or naan or paneer tikka have become very famous in other parts of the world as well. So we live in a world where we have become very close, and we've become interrelated. We have become interrelated. We, our own typical identity of it could be of culture, it could be of language, it could be of the way we dress. It's getting interlinked with other cultures, other identities, other food habits. Okay, so we all are imbibing that. So that is basically called as globalization. In a way, globalization deals with economics, and economics is a subject that deals with money, it deals with capital, it deals with the transaction of cash from one region to the other region, and likewise. All right, I'll give you an example of you might have heard of call centers in India. All right, so what these people do in call centers, they have a alias name. That means they have, suppose my name is Shilpa, and then if I work in a call center, I would have a different name according to the country that I'm dealing with. What do call centers do? They call up people all across the world. Now and then I would have a different name for calling that country. If I'm calling America, then I might be called as Agatha. All right, and I will have to change my accent. I'll have to go through a training session in which my accent will sound more American. All right, so that's what call centers do. And call centers work in diverse areas. It could be the banking sector, it could be the policy sector. For example, in India we have LIC, so something like that is also there in America. So it is banking, the policy sector, the medical sector. It could be maybe a company which has got a section in which it has got a department in which it deals with complaints of clients. So those complaints are diverted to countries like India, where an Indian person is going to pick the call, is going to deal with whatever the customer has to say, is going to note down what the person wants, and is going to help them. So globalization, what is it? It is an economic activity in which it allows free movement of labor. Okay, free movement of labor, goods means things that we use for a business, and capital means the investment that is done to start a business. And this is done across countries, this is done across continents. All right, America being so far away from us, or United Kingdom being so far away from us, we have call centers of even from Australia, of UK, of America, and we are beautifully able to manage the system. All right, now when did this start? This started with the invention of computers. All right, so kind of about 40 years ago, all this started, that world became a more interconnected place. Not that in ancient times people did not move together. Okay, globalization, like say for example, I can catch a flight and I can reach Paris, and then I can reach some other place, and then I can reach some other place, and in a week's time I can come back to my own country as well. In ancient times also people used to move, but the scale of the movement was not as much as it is today, because our transportation has become better. And forget about the transportation, our means of communicating with each other through the computer, through the internet, is so easy that you even need not leave the premises of your home, and you can conduct a business meeting. All right, now I was telling you about even during the ancient times in India, but you don't have to confuse globalization with the movement of travelers during the ancient times. For example, it is a well-known fact that India was the country who invented the concept of zero. All right, and from India the Arabs learnt the concept of zero, and the Arabs then passed it on to the Europeans. See, from in India made many mathematical concepts, many scientific concepts which were learnt. These Arabs used to come to India through the Silk Route, which is a part of China. All right, so from there they came as traders. They learnt many things from here. So those things were exchanged. All right, that knowledge was exchanged. That knowledge was given to them. They learnt it. They, from the Silk Route, they went to Persia. Then they went to Arabia, and from Arabia, those things were, that knowledge was given to the Europeans. The Europeans also were traders to these guys here. Okay, so the Europeans learnt it from them. So just imagine, from one country, India, the many mathematical and scientific concepts went through the Silk Route to Persia, to Arabia, and then to Europe itself. But that cannot be confused as globalization. All right, globalization in today's world is an economic arrangement which is meant to allow free movement of labor, goods and capitals across different countries. All right, and sometimes when we do that, we adopt the culture, we adopt the dressing sense, we adopt the food habits of different countries around the world. All right, now there is an example of how the potatoes, the tomatoes, coffee was not part of the Asian culture because it did not grew here. But when the Europeans came and they started settling in India and in other parts of Asia and made it their colony, they brought these plantations and they brought these potatoes, tomatoes and coffee along with them. And that's how today see, in South India everybody has coffee. A cup of coffee is needed by everybody. Now they were attracted to India. Europeans, we all know, were attracted to India. Why? Because of course it was a very rich country, but the two things which attracted them, one was cotton and the other was spices. All right, and so when they came and settled here, they took the laborers. They had colonies not only in India, but they had colonies in the Caribbean, they had colonies in the West Indies, and they took laborers from in the Indian origin laborers. They took them and they made them, they settled them there so that they would do the work in the fields or in the plantations. All right. Now, for example, I will tell you the West Indies, the West Indies, who happen to be the cricketers. If you have heard their names, they are so Indian names, of course, because these people were taken by the British to West Indies to work in those days. All right. So, for example, Mahendra Veeran, Nagamoto, Rohan Rahaya. Okay, so these are familiar names, in Indian names, and they were made to settle there. Of course, not at all times it was a good thing to do, because it brought untold misery on the families whose children were taken away. All right, the mostly the young boys were taken away from the families to work as laborers in these colonies that the Europeans had made, and they never came back. But then they settled there, they had their own families, and hence the culture, the Indian culture, went to so many other places. All right, but it also brought, of course, misery to the family. But all this movement of people from one part of the world to the other part, it brought many diseases also. Okay, for example, if the plague of the 18th century, had there been no movement in the world, it would have contained in England itself. All right, but because of the movement of people, Indian people went there, the British, of course, were there, and then they came back to govern us. So all that movement spread the plague. For example, like the COVID today, it emerged in China. Had we was if the world was not moving around, then what would have happened? It would have remained contained in that particular nation, and it would not have disrupted the whole world as such, and we wouldn't have been the way the lockdown that we are in. So globalization has got its very attractive packages, but also a lot of misery comes out of globalization, because it's not only about diseases. These capitalistic countries which invest in maybe developing nations, what they do is they make you work for a very less amount of money, and because you're in a developing nation, that amount is fine for you. But then what is happening in their own countries? People are not given jobs, because if they give the job to their own countrymen, then they will have to pay more. So what is happening? A few people are getting rich. Suppose we're talking of the American call center. So if they are involving the Indians will work at a very less price as compared to the American people. So the American employees are less, and the Indian employees in our country through that call center is more. And what they're doing is, if they're paying less to the Indians here, and the jobs which an American might have got, that's being transferred to India. So what is happening? They are saving a lot of money. The capitalists or the industrialists are saving a lot of money, but that money is only going in their pocket. It's not being distributed in the society. So these are a few of the disadvantages of globalization as well. All right, so I will give you some questions. See, in India, we do have the Italian pizza, all right, and that pizza has tomatoes, basil, mozzarella. So, it's all because of globalization. And we have these cold drinks, and, which the Indian, it is not of an Indian origin. In ancient times also, I will tell you, the religion of Buddhism, it was founded in northern India, and then from northern India it traveled to so many parts of the world. For example, it traveled to Sri Lanka. Ashok sent his daughter and son. Then he sent his daughter and son to the present day Iran, Iraq and Persia. Then it went to China, it went to Japan, it went to Cambodia, it went to so many other places. All right, so but that is not what globalization was. It used to happen in the early days also, that people used to travel from one part of one land to a different land, and things were being transferred. But the way globalization has become today is very different from what the travelers did in those times. All right, I'll give you a few questions, and I want you to do these questions and we will make a notebook also, and when we are back we will be seeing it. Okay, the first question that you need to write is, what is globalization? How is it different from the phenomenon of migration of goods, capital, etc. that the world experienced earlier? Okay, so that's one question that you're going to do. What is globalization? How is it different from the phenomenon of migration of goods, capital, etc. that the world experienced earlier? I've explained both the things in a very, what do you say? I've explained it properly. So now look for the answer through my video and please do it in your notebook. This is for class 8. Alright, I will see you tomorrow.